Well, we are going to have some kind of fun with Scott Walter today because you see, he is in the wonderful state of Louisiana, driving cross country after going to CESO. And so, Scott, how was Slow?
Slow was great. Had a wonderful time there. Met up with the Michigan Owners Group, and we had some fun along with Brian White. So he's like an honorary member of the Michigan Group, as am I. And so Kelly and Bert and Tesla Granny and Kenneth, we spent some time together. And then I also changed accommodations, and with John Gibbs, we were invited to stay with a local family there, and just a wonderful location that they had, very, very close to the venue. And yeah, I can't say more about how wonderful it was. And I could have stayed longer. It was quite enjoyable.
That's good. Well, we're glad to have had you here in our state, and but now you're heading back to Florida, and we did actually this week have some news with regard to Optimus. Well, actually, maybe yeah, some with Optimus. I think we got some stuff to talk about with Optimus. Why don't we start with what Elon had to say, and anything else that you thought was newsworthy this week on Optimus?
Okay, well, yeah, I think what we want to do is we want to kind of back up a little bit historically what was going on. So if you remember, I'm thinking it's almost like 2 months ago that Elon made a comment that someone else had made. So someone was talking about humanoid bots and everything else. And I don't even think they were directly tagging Elon or anything else about people don't understand what the robot revolution is going to be like. And he chimed in on the comments and said, oh, and the next version is going to have a 22-degree freedom hand. And that was just like a bolt out of the blue. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, no one was prompting him on that. Why was he talking about that? Then there were some other comments kind of go along, and he says, oh, and by the way, we're going to put the actuators in the forearm.
Right.
You remember, I jumped on that and said,
yeah.
Whoa, this is not a new hand design. This is like redesign the entire lower arm
right.
of the bot.
Exactly.
It's not a snap-on hand or something like that, because now you're talking about the actuators being down here and not up here like they currently are. So currently, you could almost take the hand off of Optimus, and it's viewed that way. From when they do the count of the degrees of freedom, they're counting the degrees of freedom as just the fingers, not the wrist. The wrist is not part of it, because they count the wrist as in the hand. And that's a traditional way we look at it in industrial robots, is we look at the degrees of freedom to the wrist, and then whatever you mount on the wrist, and that's it. And so everyone's talking about snap-on end effectors and everything else, and changing the hand to a whisker or something like that, or a drill or something like that. And so they're going this way. And once you move the actuation from up here, built into the palm, to back here, that means, well, you're not taking that thing off, and it's now fully integrated. And having something fully integrated means that your control algorithms are tied much closer together. And in traditional robotics, where you have heuristics and stuff like that, it's really hard to solve the whole problem. You want to break it down into small pieces. The whole idiom about, how do you eat an elephant? And it's like one bite at a time. So when you have this really big problem, it's like, just look at the pieces that you can solve, and eventually you can put them all together. So that's how we've always attacked the problems. AI and machine learning has sort of turned that whole paradigm upside down. And now you can look at the complete system. And if you give it enough training data, the whole system will understand how to control itself together. Right. So pieces aren't independent that you try pulling together. And then, I mean, these things are never fully independent. We pretend they're independent, but there are these subtle dependencies that you would really like to account for. So now you're pulling it together, and so you can control it as if it's together, but now it's going to be mechanically together. There's no doubt about it. You can't uncouple this whole. But that was all we knew. But that was enough of a hint for me to be very confident to say that, oh, there's going to be a Gen 3 bot, which is going to be different. And there was like radio silence on that until the shareholder meeting, and Elon came right out and said, yeah, the Gen 3 bot's going to be different. So it's like, okay, validated that it's more than just going on like that. But he didn't mention anything more about the hand except that it'd be able to play the piano.
Well, he did.
Now,
He did. I thought I liked his comment though of looking at the hand as a puppet with the strings being
yes,
above. I thought
yes,
that was helpful in terms of
yes,
understanding how it
yes,
works.
yes. Now it's always being done that way anyway. So the actuators are in there and they're attached to these tendons, which are what's making it move. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you've got tendons here, you can also have the tendons back here, which is exactly the way the human body works. Now, Elon gave more detail because a lot of times when he sort of likes an approach, when he's given the opportunity, he'll expound upon that.
Right.
And at the takeover event, right here, X takeover.
Yeah.
Let's make sure everyone remembers that next year. Randy, I mean, I drove across country. You could have at least driven across the county to go ahead and come up. But anyway,
a couple of counties. Yeah.
a couple of counties. Yeah, I realize it probably takes as long to get from South Los Angeles up to slow as it does for me to drive across the country.
5 hours. 5 hours if there's no traffic.
If there's no traffic. Okay. Which is why I'm returning the north route. I didn't even, I could have gone south like through Phoenix. I'm like, nope, not going through South LA. No way. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, so Elon just given that venue the opportunity to do it. Now he was really only supposed to talk 5 minutes just to say hi to everyone and thank you, coming, and that they were hoping maybe it would be like 15 minutes. But it ended up being like an hour. It could have been 2 hours, except John from Tesla Silicon Valley Owners group. He was like, he wanted to be really respectful of Elon's time and not just keep on saying, oh, we'll keep it going. Right. But I think Elon would have given us 2 hours if he wanted. As it was, he gave us big 15-minute chunks on a lot of things. First 15 minutes was on SpaceX and a lot about, the robotaxi, and then the opportunity to talk about Optimus. And his observation was that when you start to build a humanoid bot and start solving his problems, you begin to realize that nature has already figured out the solution. It's already looked at the problem and said that, oh, if you want to actuate this hand and still allow the hand to be, small and nimble so it can get into places and do stuff, you got to move the actuation behind the wrist.
Yeah.
You got to move it back there. That's where it's going to be. So they kind of get the inspiration for that. It might seem rather obvious, but so, okay, we'll move it back there. And, certainly there have been other hand designs where people are doing something like that. Clone Robotics is a great example of they're building a very human-like hand that's using actuation, probably through hydraulics. But my suspicion is that Tesla is just going to be using tendons. And the question is, what are the tendons made out of? Are they metallic? In which case they have a little bit of springiness to it and be compliant, or something like Kevlar, which tends to not stretch, to give you better control. And the reality is, it doesn't matter. If I was building this hand heuristically, I would demand Kevlar, because I just don't want to have to account for the fact that, these tendons are going to stretch and do everything else. But when I've got machine learning, it's like, hey, I can use whatever's the cheapest and makes sense. And maybe you want the compliance in there, so sometimes you want the thing to be springiness when you go and grab or hit something really hard, like you're grabbing an egg. I don't want to break the egg, right?
Yeah.
So we're not quite sure what they're going to choose, but I think they're going to have a second generation actuators. Elon was talking about how they keep on building these actuators. They're custom, and I'm sure they learned a lot, and they probably learned maybe a better way of being able to retract the tendons on these poles, these puppet strings that they're trying to pull.
Right.
They may have come up with a better, more compact way. So as far as the other things we know from the shareholder meeting, he said it can play the piano.
Right.
But we know from someone that went on the tour that I'd met the night before. I said, I want to find out, can it do this?
Yeah. He
asked Elon, can it do this? And Elon said, no, this is of no practical use. To which the Trekkies got really upset, It's like, what do you mean? But so what that means is that you would need an actuator for each of those fingers to be able to do that finger spread, or I think what they call ab adduction. Okay. Yeah. But if it's doing it together, that's like one puppet string you're pulling on that makes all of them do this.
Right.
So that means you're going to go from the current 6 actuators to at least 7. I don't think any more than that. And that means they're all going to go back here.
Right.
Okay. So now with this, we are going to have limited space back here. I mean, it's like, I was looking and saying, oh, there's some space back in there, but still kind of already occupied. So they're really redesigning it, which makes me think those actuators might be a little bit more compact than the ones they currently have. I don't think they've taken the current ones and shoving them back there.
Yeah.
I think they've come up with a design. Yeah. And then now I'm going to ask you, Randy, if you're going to do a complete redesign of this, are you going to stop there?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, probably, especially if you've gotten any new ideas, you're going to go ahead. You're probably doing the whole arm. Yeah.
Yeah. You're probably doing the whole arm. In which case, maybe you're coming up with some new actuation and some new strategies, some compact motors, or maybe coming up with some clever solutions. So as you know, I'm on the record of absolutely hating the shoulder solution that everyone is using.
Right.
I mean, absolutely everyone is using that. I was even surprised that Giant AI, which was also kind of a puppet master, they had all their servos down in the base somewhere of the torso, and they were running tendons throughout everything. And even the way they designed the shoulder was like your typical yaw pitch roll kind of solution. Like, why do they do that if they're tendons? They could actuate it anyway. Why don't they have like a real ball and socket design there? Because that's nature's solution.
Right.
So Elon was talking about nature's solution. And nature's solution for here and also down the hip is a ball and socket.
Yeah.
And and the thing is, the solution that we've seen everyone come up with is the more mechanical engineering solution with the actuators where you stack them together.
Sure.
So what we've done on the shoulder is on the human body, there's one joint at the shoulder. We solved it mechanically by creating 3 joints.
Yeah.
That are yaw, pitch, roll is the way to look at it. With 3 motors that are stacked together, where you try to align the axes to kind of intersect at a point in space to come up with a solution. But it's very inefficient because it's 3 motors.
Right.
That each are acting as an individual joint. And is there some way that you could just solve and put the whole thing together? So my solution would be to come up with a spherical actuator. Right now, all the actuators are either linear or they're cylindrical. And why not come up with a spherical one? There are some designs that are out there, but you know, Tesla knows a thing or two about designing actuators and coming up with really compact things and looking at it. And if you get someone who's clever enough to look at it and understand the problem that they're trying to solve, I think you can come up with a solution. And the solution I'm going to pitch, and if they come out with it, this is what they got to call it, okay? You heard it here first, Randy.
Okay.
I'm going to call it the quaternion drive.
The which now?
The quaternion drive. I want to see them come up with a quaternion drive. Basically it's a type of spherical actuator.
Okay.
And the way to think about it is that a quaternion is a way of describing orientation in space. That's the most mathematically elegant. The simple way that we do it when we don't understand enough about math is we break the problem down into 3 rotations about 3 principal axes. A rotation about the X, Y, and Z, which are typically called yaw, pitch, and roll.
Right.
That you rotate on one axis, then you rotate about the other, and you rotate the other. And that means you have to describe angles about your principal axes. But there's another way of describing it that are sometimes referred to as single axis orientation, where you find some orientation to some vector in space, arbitrary direction in space, and then you rotate about that some angle, and that gets you the same orientation that you want to have. But that means for each orientation, there's a different vector that you have to rotate about. Once you find it, and then you rotate a certain angle about that. And that can be described as this thing called a quaternion. And a quaternion gets its name from the fact that it's a vector of 4 elements. And basically, it is a direction vector. The first 3 elements kind of are a direction in space. And then the third one is an angle of rotation in radians. And then they make it a unit vector, so they basically hide all the information. You don't see that it's in, you kind of, some of the information is lost, but basically that's what a quaternion does. So conceptually, what you think of it is, oh, the idea is I point somewhere in space and I rotate. So what I'd like to do is come up with some sort of rigging where I can take my traditional cylindrical actuator, okay? So take this little motor and put it on a gimbal that you say, turn this cylindrical motor into some, point it in some direction in space and rotate about that axis. That's what you got to do. That's kind of the concept of a quaternion drive, where now you think of about that gimbling mechanism might be some sort of ball. So just imagine you have built in to your ball something that's able to have like a normal axis that you rotate about.
Right.
And that gives you your rotation. And that's where you get, like, let's say, the bulk of your torque and your speed of that thing. The rest of it is just kind of pointing it somewhere in space. Just like move it over here, move it over there, move it over there. So you have a ball where you have some way of being able to act. And you can do this with magnets. Trust me, you can. And you can make it compact. And you can make it a single motor, which means you don't have wires like running all over the place. It's got to go from one motor to the next motor to the next motor. And so it's like one compact thing. And that means your whole package, rather than looking cylindrical and kind of squared off and everything, will start to look more like a globe, a little bit round. Now, the other thing you're going to say, but what's really difficult is that, you know, with the quaternion, you can point that axis anywhere in space. But with this one, mechanically, you're going to have all kinds of problems that you're limited on your motion. You know what? Fine. Look at your shoulder.
Yeah.
Your motion is limited in most directions except this one. The one that's that axis of rotation you want to go about. You only need to get that thing to go plus or minus 180 or get the 360 out of it. The others, if you can point 45 this way, 45 that way, 45 this way, 40, that's all I want. I don't want any more than that. Maybe give me 120, no more, okay? I don't care, because you're limited. You can't do that anyway.
Right.
And what this means is that rather than trying to solve a much bigger problem, you are solving the shoulder problem right there. That's the shoulder problem. Guess where else you get a ball and socket joint, Randy?
Same place. Yeah. It's a hip. Yep.
Where else? Where's the other place?
I said the hip.
The hip. The hip. So you make two sizes. You make a shoulder size and you make a buttock size one. Remember I said this is spherical?
Right.
I mean, you know what the actuators look like right now on Optimus? I mean, there are these things that are these things sticking out.
Yeah.
And I keep on saying, Optimus is one butt you don't want in seats. You know, I don't want that thing driving my Tesla.
Right. Right.
It's going to tear my seats up. You come up with a quaternion drive and you put it down the hip, Optimus will finally have a Maximus gluteus or gluteus maximus, which I can never remember the order of the terms, but basically it's going to have something that will look like a butt that will be nice and smooth, and that thing can go ahead and whoop, sit in your car if need be when you decide to go somewhere or anywhere else. And then again, it will probably, you know, something like that, if done right, could also speed up the walk and reduce the power consumption. Could do lots of stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. And then again, when it comes to their hand, I have a feeling they're also coming up with something a little bit different, something similar but different on what they're currently doing for the actuation of the wrist. It is going to be very, very different. So yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a side. Elon didn't talk about that, but this is either the tea leaves or if they're doing that, please give me a call. I mean, I know this can be done. Someone's going to solve that problem. Absolutely. Now, the other thing that Elon did talk about with Optimus is that next year they're going to have, I think, what they call production design 1.
Yes.
And so they're going to produce that. And as we've always talked, and I just want to make sure this doesn't decide to suddenly fall down because the road's a bit bumpy here, that they're going to make probably 1,000 or more of these. And they're going to be just for internal consumption to prove out in the Tesla factories.
Right.
It's going to be babysit with lots of engineers, making sure it's doing exactly what it needs to do to grab the data that you're going to need for that. That's going to be very, very important. So we'll be in the factory. Now, 1,000, okay, Randy, it's really easy. And at this point, they'll be close to design locked. It means they're setting something up. To be able to produce 1,000, you're not just talking about a bunch of artisans going in and knocking these things off.
No.
It means you're starting sort of an early kind of ramp up phase.
Right.
And Elon's even hinted it'll probably be more than 1,000, might be a few thousand. I think Jeff Lutz also brought up a good thing, is that some of these optimi are going to be going through destructive testing. They're going to be designed to bring them to the breaking limit. You know, carrying payloads more than they can, going through lots of cycles, running them really fast, putting them in extreme environments, very wet environments, very hot environments, very dusty environments. Because look at all the Cybertrucks that are crashed and tested.
Sure.
That's what they have to go through with the Cybertruck. And you do it with any sort of product. You do destructive testing on them.
Right.
So a fair number are going to be really to put it through the rigors of that. The others we talked about is that you would like to have a fairly good-sized fleet for collecting data.
Right.
And now that data collection at this point is not going to be in the lab at tables folding T-shirts. It's going to probably really be in the factory, really doing work in the factory. Big concern is that you put it, it's probably going to be in Fremont, even though Elon also said I think he said in this one, he also said production will be done in Giga, Texas.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be done in Austin. So that's where the lines are going to be set up. I suspect the early versions of Optimus working in the factory are not going to be in a place where it's going to slow the production line down.
Right.
Unless they've got it nailed, it's working so well, we can go ahead and put it. It's not going to be on the Model 3, Model Y line in Fremont. I think they throw it on the S and X lines because S and X lines are running one shift a day. So they could run like a second shift just to test Optimus out.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. So that would be one place to go in and get the training data. And there's another reason to do it there. It's much harder to find jobs for Optimus to do on the 3 and Y. And you know why?
Because it's so automated already.
Part of that, and what is the big difference between the S and X and the 3 and the Y? Starts with a T, then has a C in there. The Giga casting.
Oh, the Giga casting. Yeah. So you have lots of little parts. Okay.
Yes, the Giga casting put about half of the body shop out of business.
Right.
And probably the most intense part of the body shop, because that's the underbody. You have lots of robots there. You have lots of small pieces that are having to be put into fixtures to go into these welding cells. Now you have labor of picking up these small pieces of pressed sheet metal and dropping them in. You go over to 3 and Y, you're not going to find as many of them because, remember how Sandy talked about, they have like 179 parts or something like that. Now there's one.
Yeah.
So that means you've got 179 parts that have to be manipulated at some point. It's right for the picking to put Optimus in there. So that makes sense to go in there. You're going to kill your margins or do anything. You're going to get the important data, and you will be able to. So that's where I think they would be doing in Fremont. And now the question is whether those 1,000 optimi are coming out of the whatever limited production capability they have in Fremont or Palo Alto, which I suspect is where it is, or whether they really will have something kind of already set up in Austin and then they go up there. And then once that's working, whether they start putting it in different places in Giga, Texas. And they would do it when they know it's not going to take the line down.
Right.
So the thing is, coming up with 1,000 optimi are easy. Coming up with 1,000 applications, that's a little bit trickier. That's why.
So yes and no, because we have to think about sub-assemblies. I mean, a lot of people just think about the manufacture of the car. They think about the line. But just like with Optimus himself, you've got a whole bunch of different parts going into every one of those actuators, and all those parts that are being made for the actuators are being made in injection molding or in stamping machines or whatever else. So I mean, and then you've got larger motors that go into the cars that are being made separately, and then and then brought to the line. So you've got all of these small things that can be done. That are much easier for Optimus to do, to watch an injection molding machine or to take parts off of sprues or things of that nature.
And definitely like in the automotive, and again, when you start looking at the body shop and everything goes on there, those sub-assemblies, that really is very simple pick and place.
Yeah.
But it's, it's one of those weird ones. It's the simple pick and place, but it's been really hard for us to automate for some reason.
Yeah, right.
It's always been manual, and partly because you're picking up these parts out of these large bins, and it's never in the same drop, pickup point. The drop point is always the same. The drop point is very easy. You only have to be close. And Figure already showed an example of something like that, where I think about a month ago, where they're showing that example of BMW, and they talk about they only have to be about a centimeter accuracy,
Right.
And that's true. That you only have to be about that close, because when you drop it in, the fixture takes care of the rest of it. It will drop down and get it in there. When the clamps come down, and make sure it's exactly where you want it to be. So you don't need a whole lot of precision, which means you can run pretty quickly because you don't have to be very precise. The thing is the pickup. And what they were showing in BMW at that point was that they had a stage pickup point where it was very fixed. And I was like, okay, that's very nice, but that's not the way it is on the shop floor, where it's already, in a presented location for you. It's like basically this, this big bin where the parts are randomly down there, and you got to figure out how to pick it up and get it and go down deeper and deeper, and it's over here. And when you take it out, identify it and make sure it looks right and everything else. So those are the things that the humanoid bots will be able to do, and why it's been a bit of a challenge, because in order to automate that, you need like this pre-automation, and you'll keep on going back, and at some point there's going to be like a human organizing everything to feed something. And then you're just saying, well, that's ridiculous. And remember, when we looked at that Shanghai video of the operator that was loading a part.
Sure.
And the funny thing is, where he was loading the part, the robot was not actually welding at that point. The robot was then picking it up and bringing it over somewhere else.
Yes.
So again, it was this example of like, okay, they're automating the feeding of the final location of where the spot welding is happening, but they still needed the human to feed it to the robot that was going to do that. So that's what I keep on saying, is like every time you try to automate, and that was like, as far as I'm concerned, that was like a stupid thing. To kind of waste it that way. But of course, the reason they need to do it is that you can't have the human running into that, getting that close to the spot welding cell.
Right.
So they needed to have a mechanism to be able to do it. Now, Optimus will be able to take care of that problem. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. No doubt about it. There's just tons and tons of low-hanging fruit like that on the X and S line for sure. Some on the 3 and Y, because there's still, some of these other sub-assemblies that have to have, but not as many. So you'll probably be able to find a fairly good number of things like that, but there's going to have to be something beyond the body shop to get up to that 1,000.
Yeah. So then Elon also talked about the fact, he kind of is interesting that he was talking about the competition, which is unusual for him. And he said, yeah, look, because of our capabilities with actuators, because of our capabilities with motors, because of our capabilities, et cetera, software, and with the FSD, et cetera, nobody can even come close to competing with us in terms of full production. And then, yesterday, Jensen puts out a video and says, well, we're going to do our best to help these other robot companies to be able to at least have some of the software lined up. We're working on 𝐓𝐞𝐬𝐿, ourselves in order to know something about robotics. So what did you think about all that?
Oh, that was interesting. So I think Dr. Jim Fan, he talked about 𝐓𝐞𝐬 and how they're combining that with simulation. And this makes perfect sense. So that Apple is probably very happy because finally someone found a use case for the Apple Vision Pro. And the idea is that you jump in the Apple Vision Pro, and rather than being made afraid of dinosaurs, you actually are able to, like the movie Avatar, inhabit an actual robot. So you see everything from the robot's point of view, and now you can go down and actually pick up a real object and move it around. So you have that telerobotic control to be able to do something. And they're showing an example of being able to do something in the kitchen. And they did say that it's a bit tedious. It's like, oh, I want to go down and I want to grab a glass and, put it up in my cupboard. And so I can do that telerobotically. But then once they have that, they say, okay, we've now figured out how to get the robot to do this one task, because we've done it in reality. And now we want to bring in simulation. So let's back up for a second on the way a lot of machine learning has done some of these algorithms that you may have seen, like where I think you might remember like the hide and seek game or something like that, where they just kind of had the rules and these agents had to understand how the game was played.
Right.
And it took them like millions and millions of iterations just to kind of get something going that they could start learning. And then once you had that, then it was easier for them to build more and more strategies. But it's that initial phase that absolutely takes forever to get there. So if I have a complete clean neural net and I know absolutely nothing about how my arm moves around to grab something, and I say, I want you to go grab this thing, it's just going to be flailing around doing all sorts of stupid things. And I think you've also seen it, like they showed examples of these agents learning to walk.
Right.
And at first they were just really just, you know, going all over the place and not being able to walk at all. And it took millions and millions of iterations before it got better and better and better till finally it was very confident. And I think there was like one example of these two agents playing soccer that was just hilarious at first.
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
learned
yeah,
to walk, they learned to kick the ball, and then they learned strategies and everything else. So when you have, you know, a new robot where you try to do end-to-end learning, probably a lot to do to get that initial sample in there. So rather than having it iterate millions of times just to figure out how to grab that glass, well, let's just grab the glass.
Yeah.
And put it in there, and now say, okay, now grab big, but it's not the same location. We're going to move it a little bit, or try different examples of grabbing the glass. It's right where it always was. We want to go to the same destination, but try optimizing the movement of the arm to get there, because maybe the human operator, because it was a bit awkward, didn't come up with what was the best solution for that arm. So it might go through and have something that maybe uses the least amount of energy, or it gets there the quickest, or something like that, or the most clearance between the elbow and something else. So you can have all these rewards in there that it could go through and iterate on them. And then what Jim talks about is that they can then bring it into the simulation and then change the kitchen, because they have only one kitchen in the group lab, one real kitchen.
Okay.
And now we want to go in and we want to change the textures on everything. So now the scenery looks very different. So it might be geometrically the same thing, but it looks different. So it's like, you know, driving during the middle of the day, driving in rain, you know, driving at night, is we have to look at all those different cases. And then we're going to have different size glasses. The glass is going to be different positions. We want to put them in different places in the cupboard. Now we can start to bootstrap that. So the whole thing is that once you get that first data sample in there, it's very easy for you to then start iterating and looking at all the design case or all the potential use cases for that object. And then maybe you can start bringing in other objects.
Right.
Or maybe there's some objects like, we grab an egg a little bit differently than the way we would grab a glass.
Right.
So let's teach it how to grab an egg right now. Or, you know, any other kind of object, or silverware. I mean, there's a different way of picking up silver. So you go and you start teaching it all these common objects that you're going to see in there, and then you can go ahead and do the simulation. And that makes sense. It's a hybrid approach. Things will work a lot faster.
So Scott, there's a good question for me, a question that I've cared about. So you teach it to grab a fork, you teach it to grab an egg, you teach it to grab a glass and maybe a cup and a plate. You've taught it to pick up and grab, 27 items. At what point do you think it gets to the place where it can grab everything?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many, but I think it will. I mean, at some point, it will intuitively figure out what's the best way to pick up certain kinds of objects, because there's some similarities between it and something else. So there are glasses, and then there are coffee cups. Coffee cups have a handle usually.
Right.
So there's like that, you need to tell it that, well, this is how we grab a coffee cup. And it'll be really interesting if you never teach it about a handled object, whether it figures out, oh, that's how you should pick it up, or whether it messes up. You're like, well, we've got to show that kind of class. But probably when you get enough classes of objects in there, it will figure out how to interpolate between them.
That's what I'm thinking. And
the question is like, how many you got to have classes of clear objects and opaque objects and solid looking objects, and objects that are heavy and objects that are light, objects that are soft and objects that are hard, objects that are very reflective or something like that, and different kinds of shapes and everything else. but eventually it will figure it out that it will look at something and be able to make a good judgment about what's the best way to solve this.
So in other words, giving me that shoulder rub is not as easy as we thought. Thin shoulders and broad shoulders, broad shoulders.
Yeah, it could be. It might be a little bit different. However, I think you'll be happier with a 22-degree of freedom hand versus the 11.
Yeah, that'll be a plus.
Yeah, now the thing we have to, the changes on the 22-degree of freedom hand, I mean, to kind of circle back to the very beginning, we didn't talk about what those degrees of freedom are. And basically, they're going to add one more knuckle to Optimus because Optimus took a knuckle away. And a lot of the other companies followed Tesla's lead on that because they said, oh, the best part is no part. Do we really need to have all the knuckles there? And you could say, well, for a lot of cases, maybe we don't. But it looks like they've decided that you really do need that extra knuckle to be way more inclusive of all the typical objects you would see. You might get away with it in the factory well, maybe not in all factory settings, but maybe a lot of factory settings. But you might say, it really is nice to have that because I've got more compliance around grabbing certain objects. I can grab something that's more cylindrical, much better, and my pressure points will be a little bit better. The other thing that is, they made all the fingers the same length because, again, they wanted to reduce the part count, or let's say the part SKUs. So what I'm wondering is whether they'll all be the same length or whether they really will have a pinky, index finger, and a middle finger, a ring finger, where those links are, or maybe they'll, these three fingers will be the same and they'll have a pinky or something like that. So we'll have to see how that is, but I think they do want it to conform a bit closer. You can definitely get it to conform closer by taking the actuators out of the palm, because now they could probably do some interesting things with the palm. Now that you don't have the palm being super stiff, by having actuators in there, that might mean they'll dare. That maybe is just a mechanical joint that makes it flexible. I don't know if it's going to be actuated. So that's a possibility that will be in there. So the other degree of freedom is that the knuckle down here only had motion in one direction, and now it has like the motion in two directions. So you add 4 joints there for the additional knuckle, 4 movements there, that's 8. 11 plus 8 is 19. And then I think they're talking about the wrist axes being part of the wrist likely. I mean, that's speculation right there, but that's the only way I can get to that 22 is I think they've redefined how they count the degrees of freedom, because in the old hand, you didn't count the wrist. In the new one, you may, because the whole thing is integrated.
Right. Saw 2 demonstrations over the last few days. One was of one of the companies using a hammer and nail, and the other was peeling a sweet potato. Did either one of those videos teach you anything new or show anything that that was surprising to you?
I didn't see that, but which company was that we were showing that?
Oh boy, see now you're going way too far there, because it was we're up to 85 companies or something now.
Okay, that's always funny. I was assuming it was like yet another company that's been able to do that. I'm not surprised. I mean, in both cases, you need a certain degree of coordination. That's what's impressive. I'm assuming one hand was holding the nail, the other one was then coming down to hitting that.
No, so that was the part that I was unhappy with, because having hit my thumb so frequently over the years with the hammer and nail, I thought that they should make that robot hold that nail, but they didn't. They actually, I think they pre-located the nail, so all they were doing was showing the ability to.
Okay, we kind of do that too. That we get it over there and we tap it in, and then once it's kind of held in, then we get our hand out of the way, and then we start swinging away. If that's the case, then that's not impressive at all. I mean, it's like, come on, you should be able to coordinate the two. And this idea of my hand coming down and being able to hit that again, I mean, that's something you can do with a standard industrial robot. The math and everything behind it is not that complicated. Now we might think it's a bit complicated because we never get the angle quite right, and the people is like going all over the place. I wonder whether they did it with AI, whether they did heuristically, because heuristically coming up with that, you could probably solve exactly where you want to hit it to make sure it's always going straight. if you are doing it end to end, there's a chance you might be a little bit off in your angle because, AI is really bad at doing arithmetic.
Yeah.
And think about it. We're eyeballing when that thing comes down
Sure.
and it looks about right. And you get enough practice, you're kind of skilled and good at it, but you're not dead on.
Right.
But if you have a good vision system and everything else, I could easily take an industrial robot arm and do that. The math is super easy. On that. So again, it could be these things that look impressive, but when you look at behind the scenes, like, not really. So now with a potato and with a peeler, I'm assuming it was with two hands.
Two hands, yep.
Two hands going through. Okay, so now there's a certain amount of coordination. And that's very, the hammer and nail, that's a rigid body problem. And it's, you might think, oh my goodness, this is something else. It grabbed a hammer. It's like, okay, it grabbed a hammer. It's in a known location. You calculate the full center point, which is what we do with an industrial robot all the time. And my nail is very solid, and I know where the end is on that. Right. All I do is I come down and make sure I strike it exactly at the normal, and it's going to go in.
Yeah.
And then I take another image. Where is it now? And now I know where the next strike point is. And you just keep on doing it until you like the final location of that. The whole thing is rigid body. With peeling the potato, that's something that's it's a little bit different because it's in math we call it the ubiquitous potato. Whenever you tried solving these problems in calculus, you came up with like a generic shape. Remember that, Randy?
Yeah.
And rather than saying like a sphere or a cylinder, which is saying, well, that's contrived. You come up with something that's more general. It was like always this ubiquitous potato shape. That's a little bit trickier to kind of go and figure out what you're supposed to do. What's the path? Because now it's not a straight line. It's like we're trying to figure out what we do. And then you've got this force feedback you're going to have with the peeler and going along there and making sure that you're not going too deep. And that as you're pulling along there, are you getting a lot of resistance, which tells me you have to change your orientation a little bit because, now you're digging too deep in the potato, right? Yeah. I'm going to get stuck in there. So, I mean, that could be, but again, it's one of those things you could almost solve with an industrial bot. If you really were focused on that problem, you could. But hopefully they're not. Now, this is the thing is that we're seeing a lot of impressive demos coming from a lot of these other companies. And it may be they got a good demo for that. So hopefully they're using some form of machine learning to learn that particular skill. But, coordination of two, so is it holding out there, just going to, and then moving it around until it gets done finding the open parts. And of course, the finger was probably getting starch all over it, right?
Well, in the sweet potato case, I do remember that was that had an operator in a suit next to it, helping it, or hands.
Helping it,
I think.
But who was holding the potato? That's the whole thing.
The robot was holding the potato
in its hand. In its hand.
Yeah.
Okay. And was it wearing a glove?
I didn't pay any attention to the glove.
That's because that's where, Elon talked about accessories for the robots. That's going to be a classic example. When the robot is working in the kitchen, it wants to be wearing gloves for a variety of reasons. One is normal food safety handling, stuff like that. But the other is, remember, these bots aren't sealed on the hands. Yeah. And whenever you peel the potato, your hands get pretty sticky afterwards. You get a lot of starch all over it. And then, especially if it's like a sweet potato, it's like, oh, suddenly my hand is orange. And suddenly it feels really funny and crinkly on it. You got to get all that starch. You don't want that stuff getting in the joints.
Yeah.
So you would definitely want to have. So I was thinking, well, did they really hold it directly in the hand, or do they use another utensil, like a fork, and like stick a fork in that thing and keep it offset so it's not getting all over? But even then, if the robot's peeling potatoes, onions, peeling onions.
Oh yeah.
Even though it doesn't have eyes that are going to water, that onion liquid's going to get all over the place.
Yeah. Oh, lots of things. Yes. Blackberries are the worst.
You need an apron. It's going to need an apron and everything else. And every now and then it's going to have to take it might even have a visor, or something like that it can clean really easily, or every now and then it's going to have to wipe its camera system off because whether it cries or not, it's going to be getting that onion juice all over it.
Interesting. Oh yeah. Hadn't thought of that. How about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
So Scott, are you on, this is all on Starlink, right?
No, this is actually 5G right now.
Oh, it is. Okay.
I used my data plan. Tomorrow, I think I get reset because it's the 1st of August. So, yeah, I did a video with John over by Meteor Crater,
Yeah.
and I think I completely consumed my bandwidth there.
Oh, I
So,
see. I see.
hanging up in there in the emergency case. Now, actually, someone from the Michigan Owners Club who also has Starlink, the Starlink Mini, he had to use it the other day in Sequoia National Park. As they were in there was a car that had rolled over on its side.
Oh, wow.
And so they needed to call 911,
Oh.
and there was no cell service. No cell service in the national park. Oh, can you believe that? And yeah, so he had a Starlink Mini and was just able right there to make the call. So
Nice.
there are locations, and we stayed outside of Kingman, Arizona, up in the mountains, and there was no 5G and there was no Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And both of us had a morning meeting that we had to attend, and Kelly Sloan was she was about to go, oh no, she had to get her meeting. So I said, we'll have to stay somewhere else. I said, Kelly, don't worry, the Starlink works. And she did it. And I was really surprised at how good the Teams meeting was. I mean, this is Microsoft Teams, ran really well. And this is like 2 days after CrowdStrike, like took the whole network down. And so, yeah, the Starlink Mini was surprisingly very good. It was in a mountainous area. Now, I guess we're about a mile closer to the satellites. I don't know if that helped. Because we're like over 5,000 feet. We still had some trees, we found a parking space was all right. And I don't know if I told you this. I've told the story a bunch of times, so everything's like, oh, here he goes again on it. But we decided to have some fun with the Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi, because it's not inside a house, you don't have walls to go through, you can pick it up really far away. So if you're camping with this thing, you can be several hundred feet away. You still have a really good Wi-Fi signal. Wow. So I was taking my team's meeting in the parking lot, walking around without any problem on my phone. So you didn't have to be right there. The next thing we did, we went down the mountain on a convoy. So Kenneth was in front of me, Bert was behind me in a Cybertruck, and they both were leeching off of the Wi-Fi signal of my Starlink Mini. So basically, we had 3 vehicles that were streaming. At that point, they were downloading YouTube, and that's probably why I used up my 50K.
No kidding.
Everyone was, but we wanted to do this test. And further on, we did the test in Nevada. Kenneth was behind me, and we decided to make a live video over X. So we did a video call over X, which is probably not the most efficient way of doing it. Right. So it wasn't a Zoom call, but I did that call to Kenneth. Said, let's test this out. And eventually we'll get a video out of it because Kenneth's mom took a video of the whole interaction. And so I've got my phone, my Starlink dish, which is right back up here somewhere. And so signal from here to there, up to the satellite, to the gateway, to the broader internet, to the X servers, back to the gateway, back up to the satellite, back down to my dish, and then over to Kenneth because he was like 100, 200 feet behind me, still using the same Wi-Fi signal. Now, I've checked with a couple people. So, I mean, was it just going to my Wi-Fi and over to his? It's like, well, there may be some systems that will download something locally for that to see that you're on the same LAN, but it's just like, that's not the way X works. Definitely had to go over and back. And we had no latency. And of course, while I'm doing it, he's doing it at the same time. He's like, his is going up, coming down over to me. So both of those get spliced in and they work. And it was just remarkable that, we could do something. Of course, that's because he hadn't got he had his dish, but he didn't have it plugged into his car yet. He didn't have mount ready for it. So it's like, oh, okay. So the next time we're going to test, from him being in the other part of the country and me being here and seeing how that works as well. But it's rather interesting that, it can work that way. And again, a pretty broad Wi-Fi signal that if you're in a convoy, just one of you can have it.
And this is only, I would say, less than 12 years after I was just absolutely blown away that I could watch a video in the middle
Yeah.
of the
So you
desert
see
on the way to Vegas. Yeah.
right now, you see that? You see my Starlink right now? I just took this down
Oh, yeah.
and tried to get a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
see it. Yeah,
I'm-
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that's where it is. That's how I get it mounted. If anyone wants to know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, we're making some progress here.
Oh yeah. So I've been quite impressed with how, and I guess the Mini is selling like hotcakes.
Is
The
it?
other thing is that I think over the weekend or about a week ago, they finally came up with a referral program on Starlink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually works in the US. And so I've got a referral code somewhere. I probably have to post it again to get it out there. What it means is that if you use that, you get a month free subscription once you purchase anything. It doesn't just mean the Mini, but even if you get traditional Starlink service.
Yes, I think you were the first one to post your referral number, I think.
Yeah, one of the first. There were some others that were finding it. You had to actually get like an email invitation from Starlink
I
to
see.
be able to use that code. And I was like waiting and waiting for it to finally came. And it came in. I was like, oh my goodness, look, I have something. So that's there. And yeah, and it looks like they've opened up the Mini for a lot of people. I don't see that there's any. It used to be you kind of had to wait to get Starlink.
I see. Yeah. Now
But
it's
they
like
seem to be
everywhere.
more and more enough covered. Now, another thing, just to point out, is that it was really impressive that the Mini was able to help someone out in a national park
Right.
where there was no cell phone service.
Right.
And I sent it to a couple of Starlink contacts that I have. I said, wow, I mean, this is pretty cool what your Starlink was able to do. And they were like, oh, yeah, don't worry. Pretty soon, direct to cell will take care of that problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like this is like a short-term solution right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be streaming videos or something like that with
Right,
direct to
right.
cell.
Right.
What that means is like if you're caught in the middle of nowhere, your phone will be able to do it, because the one thing that the Mini doesn't have a built-in battery. You have to lug your own battery around with you.
Oh, okay.
The battery has to be 25 watts.
Okay.
So right now, the Starlink Mini fits in my backpack. The battery I need for it does not. So a normal battery bank won't work, because a battery bank is about 10 watts. You need one of those that's a bit more serious, that has like 12-volt output, something like that, that you're kind of lugging around.
Yeah.
So and obviously your cell phone has a very tiny battery in there that's very portable. And this is what's going to be impressive with direct to cell, the fact that but that's going to be basically texting and maybe making an emergency phone call, something like that. Yeah. It's not going to be that, I can go out to some mountain peak and just start taking Zoom calls out there. That's not going to work direct to cell.
No, but as Elon pointed out the other day with regard to the Mini, and I guess as you point out, it'll just be temporary, is that with the Mini now you can have emergency services, you can have firefighters out with the fires. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what it means is, because it's very compact, it's very easy for them just to throw it in their kit.
Yeah.
It's the differences between, the original one, you had the actuation, and everyone was trying to figure out how to remove the actuators so you can have a flat pack out of it.
Right.
And have like the new version, which is flat, that allows you to mount it that way, but it still comes with two bricks. One of them is the power supply, which is pretty big.
Right.
And then also the router. And so both of those are like kind of cumbersome, that you have to carry all that kit around,
right.
A lot of wire and everything else. What I have here, and eventually I hope Starlink puts it on their website, that I was able to find the connector, the 12-volt connector to the barrel jack that fits in there. So I don't have to bring the little brick and 75 feet of wire. I have a 10-foot cable that plugs into the 12-volt, plugs into that, and I've got this small iPad size thing, and that's it. And then there's going to be all sorts of people coming up with clever solutions to mount it on the window. I just went ahead and bought some suction cups and, some basically bungee rubber bands that you can put up there. Anyone can hack something together, but it's very convenient. Yeah. And so anyone can throw it in their emergency supply kit and then pop it out when they need it. So you don't have to carry 3 items around. Just one item will do it. And it's more than strong enough for everything that you need. Way more than strong enough. So you don't need the bigger dish. Yeah, the bigger dish is if you want to do some real serious streaming and have all sorts of other people be able to multi-stream at the same time. Right. But if you just need to be in the middle of nowhere and with limited power, the Mini's still the way to go.
Very cool. Well, Scott, so many cool things going on. I appreciate it as always. In this particular case, we had to chase you down in the middle of Louisiana, but hey, whatever it takes to get your commentary.
Yeah, it's been fun. Hopefully we covered most of the items you wanted to do.
Yeah,
we got it. I could fill the void without any problem.
Okay, I'm sure I've heard that about you. All right, Scott, thanks again for jumping on with us. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Same here.